Hi, good morning everyone. A warm welcome to today's webinar on how to manage absence in your business. Before we start, I thought I'd take a moment with anyone unfamiliar with Bespoke HR to share a bit of our background. Bespoke HR is a HR consultancy set up in 2005 by Alison King, who spotted a real need in the market for high quality HR outsourced support in SMEs. Over the years, we've evolved and now we're a team of 15 providing HR support to over 150 clients across the UK. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague Katie, who's our HR consultant L&D manager, and I'm Laura, senior HR consultant. Between us, we support a number of clients in a diverse variety of industries, including hospitality, healthcare, and manufacturing.
Thanks, Laura. So we're going to start today with going over 4 components that you should think about when managing absence in your business. Laura's going to take you through the importance of having a robust absence policy and process in place. I'm then going to take you through how to classify different types of absence and how important that is, and then moving on to return to work interviews when those employees come back to work. And then Laura will finish up with covering the accuracy of reporting that absence and how to ensure you've got the correct tools in place to enable you to do that. Back to you, Laura.
Thanks, Katie. Let's look at the first component of managing absence, ensuring that you have a robust absence management policy and process. We appreciate that absence has a huge impact on your business, not just for employees who are absent, but it has a knock-on impact onto your team and productivity. Taking a proactive approach in creating policy, even if absence isn't a problem for you right now, allows you to create a policy that's fair and consistent to all employees without having to make decisions on the hop. It also takes the emotion out of the situation, especially if you've set processes to follow, and it helps employees who may feel singled out or targeted, which could lead to claims of discrimination. But what should a policy include? It's important that you define the different types of policy, different types of absence. So Katie is going to go into more detail on this later, but not all absences are the same, and they may need to be managed in a different way. Make sure it's clear on how employees can request leave and also inform you if they're unable to attend work. This avoids any misunderstandings and ensures you have good communication between you and the employee. Cover what an employee should expect when they return back to work. When we work with clients, we see that some managers feel uncomfortable about speaking with employees who have been absent and concerned about what they should and shouldn't say. We recommend a meeting that can provide a checklist or scripts to help managers, and we also support people in having those meetings so they're able to feel confident and keep on track. Finally, it's key to let employees know how sickness absence is going to be monitored. Are there going to be triggers in place once an employee reaches a certain number of sick days? That might lead to further conversations or meetings to take place to investigate those and why they might be so high. Now Katie's going to look at correctly classifying absence.
So when it comes to employees' absence, I suppose they normally fall into 2 categories, and that's the planned absence and your unplanned absence. So both of them have an effect on your business, because if they didn't, then you would be questioning as to why that person is employed if it doesn't affect the business when they're not there. But the planned absence is obviously much easier to manage because you can put steps in place to ensure that that work is covered. And it's the unplanned absence that really could have a detrimental effect on your business. And you must make sure that absence is correctly classified. This will then enable you to be able to manage that absence appropriately depending on what the type of absence is. As Laura said earlier, you can't manage all absence in exactly the same way. You need to make sure that your policy states for each type of absence how you should manage it in that situation. So if we look at the main types of absence, I suppose, in terms of the unplanned absence that we see quite a lot in businesses, and these are probably the ones we get the most questions about as consultants. So the first one, emergency leave. So this is when somebody needs to take time off, as it suggests, in an emergency to look after a dependent. So a dependent isn't just your children, it could be parents, it could be a neighbour that you are ultimately responsible for the care of. And it's when something happens that means that you need to leave work to look after that, or put something in place to ensure that their care is not disrupted. What this isn't is to cover school holidays or a date in the future that somebody just can't find anyone to look after their children or put anything else in place. That would not be emergency leave for dependents. This time is not, they're not entitled to any pay for that leave, but there's also, it can be a frustration in the business because there's no legal statement, I suppose, which says how much time someone is allowed to take off. So we do sometimes have to deal with cases where someone's taking quite a lot of time off and saying it's to do with dependency leave. But if you have a robust policy in place and you have, well, we can support you in dealing with those cases if you have anything going on. Sickness is obviously when that employee is sick, and we quite often see this classified incorrectly for emergency leave. So there's someone will phone in and say, I can't come in today because I need to look after my daughter who's unwell, and they'll be recorded as sick, but they are not sick, it's their daughter that's sick. So it's important that sickness is only ever recorded when it is that actual individual that is unwell and cannot attend work. Bereavement leave again, so this is when unfortunately there is a death of someone close to the employee, unless you're sadly talking about parental bereavement leave, which is when someone's child under the age of 18 has passed away. There's no legal entitlement to that paid time off. Make sure that your policy is clear in terms of the amount of, if you are issuing any pay for bereavement leave. Again, there's no law that says how much time you should be giving people off. I think it's just really important that you're compassionate, you speak to the employee. Grief is different for everybody, and how much time they'd need off, or if they'd rather be at work. So it's really about having those conversations to see what's right for the employee. And then unauthorised absence is when somebody is just doesn't either turn up to work, so they don't give you any notice of that, or it could also be that they have asked for time off and it's been declined and they still take that time off anyway. So that would be unauthorised absence. And again, that's very different to sickness. So, and it would be dealt with in a different way, and would probably be more of a conduct issue instead of being dealt with under your usual absence policy. So then, moving on to return to work interviews then. So these should be taking place when an employee returns to work after a period of absence, normally sickness. And it's an opportunity for you to speak to that employee to make a decision as to how you can support that employee if they require any additional support, or if they've had lots of short-term absences, like one-day absences, all for different reasons. It gives you the opportunity to discuss that and remind them of the effect that their absence has on the policy, on the company, and then how you can manage that going forward. It's really difficult to manage somebody's sickness absence if you're not having these return to work interviews. So I would say the most important part of that managing sickness is making sure that you've got these return to work interviews in place. In terms of what you should be covering in the meeting, well, definitely you should be looking to see if that employee requires any support going forward. Have they got any underlying health conditions, or is there a disability that you should be aware of? Are they always off for the same reason? And what adjustments could we be putting in place to enable them to be at work instead of off sick at home? You should make sure before those return to work interviews that you've got a clear record of the number of absences leading up to that event. And we normally look at a rolling 12-month period. So that's the amount of time you'd be looking back at to look to see if they're hitting any trigger point in terms of what the business has said is an acceptable level of absence. And if they have gone over that and their absence is seen as unsatisfactory, then we should be having that conversation with them in terms of what those next steps might be. And making sure that when you are looking at any of those trigger points, and if somebody has hit one of those, you're removing any of the absences that are related or could be related to a disability or underlying health condition. Back to you, Laura.
Thanks, Katie. As we touched upon earlier, it's important to let employees know how you wish to report on sickness. This avoids frustration or misunderstanding on both sides, especially if you need to take additional action due to poor attendance levels. How are you going to capture the data? There are various different ways we can capture sickness absence data. We found one of the best to be using an HRIS system. And for example, we work with a partnership with Breathe HR, who many of our clients use, and they provide a really robust, you log on, you capture the sickness on the day that it's reported, you can close out on it and then report on it afterwards. Whatever way you wish to keep records, we really recommend that there's the same process that's used across the whole of the business. And that doesn't vary between departments or managers, as we've noticed that can cause disparity within the business. If one manager is reporting and capturing sickness data and another isn't, then that can lead to quite a few issues. How are you going to use triggers or tools like the Bradford factor, which is a tool that uses length and frequency of an employee's sickness absence to give them a score? I think you need to look at the triggers and consider, are they reasonable? Are they fair? And on also a pragmatic level, is there someone in the business who's going to be able to capture that data, monitor it and interpret it on a regular basis? I think it's worth noting that triggers and scores don't provide the complete picture on absence, and decisions shouldn't be solely made on the data alone. They are used as a way really to initiate a conversation to understand the reasons behind the absence. As with all reporting, the reports you get are only as good as the data you put in. So it's important not to mask sickness absence by using incorrect classification. As Katie was saying earlier, was it really sickness? Or was it actually emergency or dependence leave? We also, on that note, appreciate the financial pressures that both individuals and businesses are under at the moment, but avoid employees taking holiday to cover sickness. We particularly see this in companies that aren't able to offer enhanced sickness and rely on SSP payments only, which kick in after 3 days of sickness. So quite a lot of companies end up using, or employees use those holiday to cover those first 3 days of sickness before they get SSP. But not only does that not actually cover the true sickness levels within a company, it can have implications from a health and safety perspective as well, as there's a duty of care to ensure all employees are taking proper rest breaks from work and aren't actually just using it to cover sickness. That's the end of the presentation part of our webinar. I think we're going to hand over to Emma now, as she has a couple of questions that have already been pre-submitted for us to discuss.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. We've had a couple of questions. So the first one is, we understand that it's best practice to have an absence policy, but do we actually have to have one?
As I touched on in the presentation, I think it's really important to have a policy in place, because it gives a clear outline to employees what's expected of them, also what payments they may receive if they're sick, and also clarify how they would be managed during a sickness process. So whilst some companies feel they haven't had one in the past and they've been absolutely fine, I would suggest that it's important that people do consider absence and proactively dealing with it, rather than having to be caught on the hop, as I said, and trying to deal with it, as it can be incredibly emotive as well, depending on the reason for absence. Katie, do you agree? Is there?
Yeah, no, 100%. So don't be frightened of putting in a new policy if you haven't had one for all these years. It's definitely the right thing to do.
Definitely.
Great, thank you. And then the other question that we've received is, if an employee is going for treatment, for example, for a condition, how is it best to manage that?
Definitely, and certainly we work with a lot of employees and who have various different conditions, and I think it's all about, as Katie was touching upon, identifying that maybe through the return to work process is the initial conversation that you have. But if they're going to be having long-term treatment, for example, cancer treatment or physio treatment, then I think it's worth sitting down with the employee and identifying when's that treatment going to be taking place, proactively planning things in the diary, understanding that, depending on the side effects of treatment or how long the treatment itself might take, what's required of when that person's going to be in the office or at work, and then coming up with a plan. I think the frustration points we see are when people are there's uncertainty or miscommunication, or someone rings up and says, oh, actually I'm going in for treatment today and I'm not going to be able to come to work. I think being able to sit down is so much value, and especially to smaller businesses as well. Then everyone's clear on how it's going, when they can take time off, and when they will be back into work, and what type of work they're going to be doing as well. Because depending on the treatment and side effects, they may not, for example, be able to do customer facing work, but you might be able to work with the employee to make some reasonable adjustments in terms of their role, and do things, behavior behind the scenes or working from home more, or again, it's part of the conversation. And I think that taking that proactive approach, as I said before, a lot of clients feel concerned about having conversations about employees' health, but actually, with the right level of support and kind of guidance, and we're more than happy to give that to our clients in kind of facilitating that conversation as well.
Great, thank you. And then that just leads us on to saying, please do connect with us. You can find us on LinkedIn at Bespoke HR. The website address is there too. We offer 15 minutes of free HR advice if you've got an immediate issue or you'd just like some guidance on something that you're dealing with. You can drop us an email there, or just go online to our website and book directly. But do connect with us, and we'd love to tell you more about our business. Thank you for everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.